Good morning, everybody. We're going to get started with our Sunday school this morning. Anybody have any prayer requests we want to go over and mention again? I know we just kind of did them with Bro Jay and the choir, but if we had any more, we can go and let them know. Remember those that we just spoken, and I'll go ahead and open us up in a word of prayer. Dear God, thank you for this day you've given us. Thank you for all the blessings you've given us, Lord. I ask that you just be with me as I give this lesson, Lord, and be with the preacher this morning, Lord. I ask that just let us be attentive to every word you say, Lord. And I ask that you just be with the prayer requests on our hearts and on our minds, Lord. I ask to be with each one in a special case. In Jesus' name, pray. Amen. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 10 this morning. And we're going to be kind of looking at how Jesus called a few men and sent them out to do a mission, to do a job. As we know, Jesus, he kind of chose and decided to choose a few men to have some very special purposes for his kingdom, to preach the word and to go out and try to save lost souls. And now we're going to look at these 12 men that we know as the apostles and what their mission was to do for the kingdom of Israel. In verses 1 through 4 in Matthew 10, let's read it real quick, and it says, "And when he had called unto him his 12 disciples, he gave them power against unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal all manner of sickness and all manner of disease. Now the names of those 12 apostles are these: the first Simon, who is called Peter, and his brother Andrew, and Andrew his brother, the son James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the publican, James the son of Alphaeus, and Lebbaeus, whose surname was Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him." The first thing that we can understand about the specific instructions given here, in verse 1 we read that Jesus gave certain powers to a certain group of individuals, right? We see that Jesus gave this power over unclean spirits to heal disease and to raise the dead to 12 disciples or his apostles. A disciple is a person who learns and adopts the ways of another. These men had been traveling with Jesus and observing everything he had been doing, preaching his miracles. They had been observing all that he did. They had listened to him preach and watched him perform these miracles. Now Jesus gave them specific duties and also the ability that was to do what was necessary. These were the 12 specific men who were given the power over unclean spirits and the ability to reverse the course of diseases. Jesus had demonstrated this power, and now he gave these men access to this power. And now that was in verse 1, they're called disciples, right? But in verse 2, Jesus, or the Bible states that they are apostles now. This is the first use of the word apostle in the New Testament. In contrast to a disciple, who is essentially a follower, an apostle is a person sent out with pretty much a specific mission or a job to do. This term carries the meaning of an ambassador or an official representative with an official message. The identifying names of these 12 men are recorded for us. We know most of them, right? Every apostle was personally chosen by Jesus. They just didn't happen to show up in Jesus' friend group, right? They didn't just walk in and, "Yo, what's up, Jesus? Can I be a part of your group? You seem pretty cool." No, Jesus called out to these men and chose them specifically, even the guy who betrayed him. These men were not volunteers. They were men who had these were not men that had earned this position by meeting certain qualifications and had been certified for this work. These were just people who didn't know a lick about Jesus until he called out to them, and they followed him. The apostles were a varied group. Some were fishermen, like Peter, and some were very wealthy, like Matthew. These men, there were men who later became famous, and there are also names that when I read them, you're probably like, "Who the heck is that?" Because I kind of did that, and you have to look around like, "Oh yeah, that's them." These men would do many wonderful works for the Lord. They would make a powerful appeal to Israel to accept Jesus as the Messiah. They would go on to be powerful witnesses in the churches Jesus would later establish. Some of them would be used by God to give us the New Testament. Some of them, like Peter and John, were mentioned often in the Bible, while Lebbaeus, which is also Thaddeus, is only mentioned one other time in the Bible. And so what do these men, we see that they got power, right? But what was their commission? What were they supposed to do? Verses 5 through 14, kind of lengthy reading, but let's read it real quick. And it says, These 12 Jesus sent forth and commanded them, saying, Go not into the way of the Gentiles, and into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as ye go, preach, saying, The kingdom of heaven is at hand. We also know one other person in the Bible who, before this, preached that too. That was John the Baptist, right? Jesus' forerunner. Provide neither gold verse 8. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out devils. Freely ye have received, freely give. Provide neither gold nor silver nor brass in your purses, nor scrip for your journey, neither two coats, neither shoes, nor yet staves, for the workman is worthy of his meat. And into whatsoever city or town ye shall enter, inquire who in it is worthy, and there abide till ye go thence. And when ye come into a house, salute it. And if the house be worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it be not worthy, let your peace return to you. And whosoever shall not receive you, nor shall hear your words, when ye depart out of the house or city, shake off the dust of your feet. So we see Jesus just gave these men a mission, correct? He sent them out with a very specific purpose. What was that? That was to go to the lost sheep of Israel, right? They were not commanded to go to the Gentiles. They were commanded to stay away from the Gentiles and the Samaritan cities. Jesus would give his churches a commission that is entirely different, which I'm thankful for. It would be to go unto the Gentile nations, go unto the uttermost parts of the earth. But this was a very focused and limited ministry. We must remember this when we kind of consider these powers that these men had, because these powers are very controversial today. There's many beliefs about who can hold these powers. People believe that they're still around today. But the Bible speaks differently. Also with those powers, they were given a very special message. They were declared that the kingdom of heaven was at hand. This was the same message John the Baptist had preached earlier. Jesus came as a fulfillment of John's message, and these men heard the teaching of the kingdom and witnessed the power of the king. They were able to give direct testimony when they went out to the lost of what Jesus did. Jesus came to establish a spiritual kingdom, and they were to preach that the opportunity to be part of that kingdom was now presented to Israel. As we know, Israel, most of them really didn't listen. They were the ones who actually ended up crucifying him, saying, put him up on that cross. These men had a very specific role. In order to authenticate their message, these men were given four remarkable abilities. They could heal the sick, cleanse lepers, raise the dead, and cast out demons, right? And as we all know, there's people today who preach and say that this can be you today. You can do all this. But we see Jesus gave these 4 men, or these 12 men, that ability. It's just like tongues. They were giving these abilities for one reason, and that was to authenticate who they were from. That way they knew that God sent them, that Jesus sent them, because they had power over the things that Jesus had power over, and no other man had it. So it was to authenticate who they were. These miracles were the same as those Jesus had performed in his ministry. And like Jesus, they were to perform miracles in order to confirm that the message that they were preaching. Those who interpret these verses as a modern mandate or modern teaching for ministry want to pick and choose these commandments, right? When you hear it, they just say, oh yeah, you can heal. Oh yeah, you can cleanse diseases. But Jesus gave these men all 4 of these abilities. So if one says they have one and not the other, it's you can likely show them these verses and talk to them about Jesus. If you can do one of these things, you must be able to do the others, and that includes the ability to raise people from the dead. This power was given to these men freely, and they were to freely administer it to those they met. While some may claim to reverse the course of a disease when no evidence of success is present, raising the dead is something that either happens or it does not, right? If Jesus would have called Lazarus up out of the grave and Lazarus would have never walked out, you think those people would be like, Yeah, good job, dude. Yeah, you got him. But no, when Jesus spoke and when these men spoke, things happened. People witnessed it. And there was evidence. They were commanded not to take an offering. Again, many who use these verses as authentication for their practices ignore their part about refusing any monetary compensation. You see preachers online on TV, which I don't really watch TV very much anymore, but I remember you used to wake up in the morning on some channels on Sunday morning, there's preaching. And you always hear, oh, buy this holy rag. For $10, it'll cleanse anything you got. Oh, buy this holy water, right? These men were given the commandment not to take any money for what they did because their power was not their own. They were simply to ask for accommodation, and it would be provided for them. The special nature of these instructions is made evident over also in Luke chapter 22. In this passage, Jesus gave these same men very different instructions. At this time, he reminded them of this mission and then gave them new orders. At this time, they were told to take their purses and their money and to even purchase a weapon for personal defense. This first commission was limited both in its scope and like who it was for, and also its duration. It was only there for a time. So now we're going to look at the assurances that Jesus gave these men. In verses 15 and 16, we'll read them real quick, of Matthew chapter 10. It says, "Verily I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. Behold, I send you forth as a sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves." So now that Jesus gave these men a very specific and limited job, he also set forth some principles here that apply also to all of us universally. The first given here is a principle of responsibility for our actions. The cities that were receiving the ministry of the apostles were responsible for their behavior when the apostles came to them. Remember that these were the lost sheep of Israel. When they came to a city, they were going towards the lost sheep of Israel as Jesus commanded. They needed the saving message these men preached. In relating the future judgment of these cities, Jesus compared their behavior to that of the ancient cities, kind of like Sodom and Gomorrah, where God rained down judgment in the days of Abraham. A day of judgment is coming for individuals and also a group of individuals. We may speak collectively of families or communities or of cities and states, but we must remember that a family, a group, they're made up of individuals, right? And corporate behavior, when a whole group acts a certain way, that is reflective of the people inside of them. We all make choices, and we must live with those choices we make. Those who heard this message of the kingdom and rejected it will live eternity without heaven, live eternity in hell. And what Jesus was trying to say was just that these people that rejected what the apostles were asking was just accommodation, a place to sleep, a place to lay their head, that they would be judged. One fact stands out here that Jesus has come and he has sent his people into the world out of love. That's Jesus' main thing. Jesus loved us so much. He died on the cross for us. God sent his only begotten Son. We can go on and on about that. Then we see the principle of God's divine protection. How strange, we know, to send a sheep, right, into a pack of wolves. This would be a disaster, right? If a shepherd was leading his sheep and wolves came up and he said, go on, sheep, you're good, you got it, and you just let him go on, you know what would probably happen? Those sheep would probably die. Those wolves would absolutely kill that sheep because sheep are very defenseless. They really can't defend themselves. All they can do is baa and run, and they can't run real fast. So why would Jesus say, go into the wolves' den as sheep? Because he also promised that he would protect us. He is our great protector. All these men returned to Jesus, and none of them were harmed in any way. When we do the will of God in the way God instructs us, we can count on the protection and provision of God. The safest place any man or any human being can be is in the very center of God's will for your life. Jesus also told these men to use the intelligence God gave them, right? They were to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. That's kind of tough, isn't it? It's really hard to be super smart like a snake, right? but also harmless enough where you don't do any damage like a dove. It's a dangerous situation to try to be one of these without also being the other. Some want the cunning wisdom of a serpent or a snake without the harmless character of a dove. And still others want to look at life just simple, without ever seeing any danger at any side. And Jesus was teaching balance in life. We are to be harmless to others, but we are also to be wise enough to not take irresponsible risk with our well-being. I kind of think of that. There's this young boy, he's probably early 20s. He wanted to be a missionary. Great, love it. But he also wanted to reach this third world country that had never, ever had any outside contact. He ended up going there, and within minutes of reaching the shore, I think he was there about 2 hours. He was live streaming on his phone. These people who lived on this island, the indigenous there, ended up grabbing him, killing him, and making a mockery over the beach. And I say that to say this. With the passage here, God is telling us to be wise in what we do. I have a feeling that the reason that man died, that's not where God led him. So as we go out our way, we have to be mindful of where God leads us, and we have his protection over us. We can't just go where we want to go, right? Because if we go where we want to go, likely God's not in it, and we're not going to reach anybody anyway. God has to be in it for us to reach the lost. We have to be one with him. Just kind of wrap up. We can learn many great lessons from the commission and also these instructions, but we have to be careful not to apply some of these commands that God gave these specific apostles. And speaking of that, I was speaking of the power that he gave these men, the power of healing, raising the dead, casting out demons. We must be careful on making sure we interpret those correctly. And the preaching of the gospel today is not exclusively for the lost sheep of Israel, correct? We know now that God gave the commission to go ye therefore and preach to all nations, right? God had given that, and thankful for that, because that includes me. I'm the Gentile. We are the Gentile. We do not have the miraculous abilities that Jesus gave these men. We also must not proceed without proper preparation. As we have learned, Jesus himself later changed this order. These commands were for a specific group of men at a specific time in history. Neither shall we treat those who refuse our message as these men were instructed to do. These men were instructed, they didn't receive their message, just to dust off their feet and go away. Just go on to the next city. We are taught that if someone rejects it, we pray to God, get God to deal with them again, and go back to them again. We are supposed to try to get every soul saved. Our message may be rejected over and over. We should preach it repeatedly to anyone and everyone who will listen until every soul is finally brought to Jesus. Like these men, we should take the commission Jesus has given his churches specifically and seriously. There are specific instructions for anyone who wants to be more like Jesus and to learn more from him. There are no more apostles on this earth. That office has long ago been closed, but every child of God should and be a disciple and following what Jesus has taught and what he has preached. And that is all I have for you this morning.